Chapter 8 Cognitive-Behavioral Aspects. According to Burns and Epstein, emotional disorder is the product of negative cognitions or negative automatic thoughts, and stable underlying incorrect or partially correct assumptions that distort and disrupt interpersonal relationships through the creation of irrational disjunctive beliefs about oneself, others, and the world. These irrational beliefs, developed and maintained in the face of evidence to the contrary, lead to decreased interpersonal objectivity due to flawed interpretations of interpersonal events. These flawed interpretations feed back to firm up the original distortive beliefs to the point that the latter become unwritten laws. Activated stable underlying assumptions such as, if someone doesn't like me, then that means that I am unlikable. These unwritten laws lead to catastrophic thinking, such as, since I am unlikable, all is lost, so that the avoidant becomes unable to differentiate between real and imagined dangers, having lost realistic internal reference points by which to judge his or her own behavior and its consequences, further escalating the antagonistic interpersonal schemas. Projective paranoid thinking. Avoidants who think in the paranoid mode create outer stress from inner turmoil by attributing their personal negative biases and guilt feelings to others, turning their own worries, fears, and self-condemnations into objective convictions of assault and attack. Projections largely account for suspiciousness, and suspiciousness for the avoidant's classic fear of criticism, humiliation, and rejection, reflecting an impoverishment of basic trust. Here are 3 common projective assumptions avoidants make about others. I feel unworthy and devalue myself. Projection of unworthiness and self-devaluation becomes, you devalue me. Therefore, the cancellation of a date due to sudden illness becomes a personal rejection. An offer to matchmake becomes humiliation for being so desperate that one needs to be fixed up. And the best intentioned advice, including that from a truly concerned therapist, becomes a criticism for prior wrongdoing. I am guilty about my sexuality. Projection of sexual guilt turns a friendly look from a stranger from a come-on or a cruise into a hostile stare or sexual harassment. I fear being controlled. Projection of fear of being controlled becomes you are controlling me, turning a potential partner's request to have a close or exclusive relationship into an assault on one's independence. Good advice becomes the advisor's attempt to manipulate for personal gain, and a personal's ad on the internet becomes not an offer to meet, meant to attract, but a pack of lies designed to attack. The making of false equivalencies. Similar equals the same thing. Avoidants think negatively due to emphasizing the similarities while overlooking the significant mitigating differences between A and B. They perceive a little questioning of them to be a shattering, critical assault upon them. See mere disinterest on the part of others as full negativity or hatred, and misinterpret advice from others, this is what you can profitably do, as a demand made upon them, this is what you should do. They see kidding as humiliation, turn constructive criticism into a put-down or a personal attack, and interpret friendliness as inappropriate sexual interest or even sexual harassment. They believe any assertiveness on their part to be the exact equivalent of aggressiveness to others, so that acceptable forwardness equates to unacceptable pushiness. They believe merely thinking about something bad equates to doing bad things. View the passivity associated with being in love as dangerous neediness, helplessness, and vulnerability, and see their minor flaws as completely disqualifying lesions. Commitment becomes entrapment. Ordinary desire comes to equal desperation. Cooperation with a friend or intimate becomes to equal submissiveness, and submissiveness comes to equal complete loss of control and total abject surrender. The uncertainty associated with all relationships becomes unpredictability. Then unpredictability becomes certainty, that of looming inevitable attack, destruction, and loss. A case example. One of my avoidant patients developed his characteristic sensitivity to criticism because he redefined criticism as anything short of complete acceptance, so that if you didn't love him completely, you condemned him totally. He developed low self-esteem because he viewed any slight imperfection on his part as a fatal flaw, and came to believe that if he was not all good, he was no good at all. He developed a fear of losing his identity completely because he viewed closeness as merging and merging as engulfment, so that any woman who liked him would, by definition, keep him from completely realizing his individuality by demanding that he submerge himself fully into her as an individual. Thinking according to exclusive and exclusively negative causes. Avoidants who think this way become selectively blind to alternative explanations for their avoidant beliefs, unable to think of any positive elements in, and so other explanations for, others' presumed negativity. They explain others' less than fully positive behavior toward them as strictly antagonistic and rejecting. Although they see the possibility of negativity in all positivity, they rarely, if ever, see the possibility of positivity in those situations that they at first perceived to be completely negative. Thus, he didn't return my phone call yet becomes not he wants to get back to me, but he is busy, but he does not like me enough to want to get back to me ever. Or he was talking to me when his cell phone rang, and when he picked it up, he turned away from me, becomes not he had to answer that call because it was his business, but he prefers the person calling him to me. Self-punitive attitudes originate along similar lines, so that instead of "my anxiety is somewhat off-putting, I better be careful," we hear a much more self-pejorative "I destroy anyone who wants to love me, and so I am not worthy of even trying to be loved." Overgeneralizing from one specific instance to all instances. Avoidants who overgeneralize slide too easily from shaky hypothesis to incontrovertible evidence to irrefutable fact. For example, a patient viewing all new relationships as if they are repeats of old traumatic ones becomes effectively blind to alternative possibilities, so that because he fell in love with someone unreliable once, no one he loves can ever be trusted again. Very frequently, avoidants negatively parentalize what are in fact positive relationships after basing their conclusions on trivial shared characteristics of new non-parental and old parental relationships, then emphasizing the inconsequential or inaccurately perceived negatively of the new based on a tenuous similarity to the less than satisfactory old. For some avoidant women, all men remind them of an abusive father, and for some avoidant men, all women remind them of a rejecting mother. Catastrophic, alarmist, or worst possible scenario thinking. Catastrophic thinking involves histrionic exaggeration, leading to overcautiousness or to the taking of desperate and unnecessary protective measures, leading to serious personal and professional misjudgments or even to making a suicide attempt. Avoidants who think this way typically make mountains out of molehills, as they indulge in all is lost, or for want of a nail the ship was lost, or for want of a penny the kingdom was lost thinking. They assign absolute rather than relative meaning to minor problematic events, then overreact to this as if they constitute major negative developments. They become unable to say to themselves, "So what?" and "big deal," then remain calm and unemotional about things that don't really matter, or even about things that do matter but not that much, or if that much, are best overlooked for the individual's overall happiness and peace of mind. Serious perfectionism is a kind of catastrophic thinking, where the avoidant discards a potentially or actually viable relationship because of perceived minor flaws, pulling back completely from valid social or sexual interaction just because the other person has merely made a single insignificant transactional blunder. Many avoidants make 2 or more cognitive errors simultaneously. For example, a patient's habit of taking criticism too seriously led him to feel too frightened and devastated to relate intimately to anyone. This serious fear of criticism started with similar equals the same thing distortive thinking, so that if someone merely requested that he do something, that request became an intended criticism that that thing was not done. Also, thinking catastrophically, he perceived actual minor criticism to be a rejection, and the rejection a warning that the relationship was in serious trouble, and that it and his life were going to end badly. Cognitive errors do not develop or thrive in a vacuum. Rather, they appear, take shape, and persist within a facilitating matrix of disruptive, often traumatic developmental events, internal conflicts inadequately resolved by normative or pathological defensiveness, negative behavioral conditioning, distortive interpersonal perceptions first formed in childhood that persist into adulthood, comorbid emotional disorder, misguided existential and socially based philosophical beliefs, and ongoing real-life stresses. In the realm of disruptive developmental events, often adults continue to think in an avoidant manner in the here and now because as children they identified with parents who thought the same way, or as children they long ago jumped to the only partly true conclusion that their parents were criticizing or rejecting them. For one guilty patient, his mother's getting even a little angry when she felt his behavior was out of line meant that she didn't love him at all. Now he believes that anyone who sets firm limits on him is, just as she did, furiously criticizing him and rejecting him completely. In the realm of ongoing interpersonal stresses, a shy, hypersensitive avoidant patient carrying on the great tradition of early parental negativity felt uncomfortable meeting new people because he failed to distinguish making a minor social blunder from ruining himself completely socially. He believed that others' basic feelings about him could change without warning, from positive to negative, just the same way his parents' basic feelings did change toward him when, as a child, he did something they disapproved of. He did not believe that adult interpersonal relationships had an inbuilt margin of error, so that most people's basic feelings did not change from positive to negative over something trivial or even momentous. Instead, he saw everybody as a parental clone who would turn on him the same way his parents did when he made childish mistakes. I could not convince him otherwise, because his family actually did continue to reject him over nothing, by showing a clear preference for his brothers and sisters now, as they did then, and seamlessly, essentially from the day he was born.